Nowadays, when childhood is associated with care, education, and the protection of children's rights, it is difficult to imagine that just a few centuries ago, everything was completely different. Medieval Europe created truly hellish conditions for children to survive, where every day could be their last. Let's take a journey into this dark but amazing world of medieval childhood. Birth in the Middle Ages was the first test. It is striking, but true. A newborn was only officially considered a human being after a special ceremony. In Scandinavia, for example, the father had to take the baby in his arms and sprinkle water on its forehead. Until that moment, the child had virtually no right to life. In poor families, where every extra mouth meant hunger for the rest, weak and sick babies were often simply taken to the forest or left by the roadside. But even recognized members of the family faced severe trials. The statistics on infant mortality are terrifying. According to various estimates, a quarter of all newborns did not live to see their first birthday, and almost half did not live to see their seventh birthday. And it was not only due to disease and unsanitary conditions, but also to the astonishing negligence of adults. Infants often fell victim to domestic tragedies. Suspended cradles, which were in vogue at the time, regularly caused deaths. All it took was for a nanny to rock the cradle too hard, and the child would fall out. In peasant homes, where people and livestock lived literally in the same room, children died under the hooves of animals or from their bites. Even sleeping with their parents could be fatal. Church documents from that time contain a special question for confession. Did you crush your child in your sleep? Paradoxically, in the upper echelons of society, children often died from excessive care. The Franciscan monk Berthold of Regensburg indignantly described how noble ladies literally stuffed their babies with food, which often led to death from overeating. While the poor starved, aristocratic children died from gluttony. A strange irony of medieval reality. Upon reaching the age of 7, a child suddenly became a little adult. At this age, children already began to work, and their labor was by no means symbolic. 7-year-old peasant children herded cattle, helped in the fields, and looked after their younger brothers and sisters. The children of craftsmen began to learn trade, and the offspring of noble families began to study military affairs. It seems completely unthinkable to modern people that medieval children were deliberately taken to public executions. This was considered an important part of their upbringing. Supposedly, such spectacles cleansed children of bad tendencies. Moreover, children witnessed their parents' intimate life. In cramped living conditions, they simply had no way of avoiding it. The age of criminal responsibility is also striking. At the age of 10, a child could be brought to trial under the full severity of the law, including the death penalty. Icelandic sagas proudly tell of boys who avenged their murdered fathers, and society fully approved of such actions. The medieval education system deserves special attention. The main pedagogical method was, of course, corporal punishment. The church taught that children bore the mark of original sin, and therefore strictness was the only way to save their souls. The Domestroy, household management, explicitly prescribed, do not spare the rod when beating a child. If you punish him with a rod, you will not die, but will be healthier. It was believed that showing love and tenderness would make a child spoiled and spoiled. One curious case, described in the Chronicles, perfectly illustrates this system of values. Before his execution for theft, a young man asked for a farewell meeting with his father. When his parent approached, the son bit him on the nose. When asked about the reasons for this act, he replied, "This is for you for never having whipped me properly in my life." It is noteworthy that the judges found this argument convincing. But perhaps the most shocking thing for modern people was the practice of raising children in other families. This custom, which persisted in Europe until the 18th century, meant that at the age of 7 or 9, a child was sent to live with other people. Aristocrats did this to strengthen political alliances, while peasants did it to teach their children a trade. In England, it was considered perfectly normal to send an heir to be raised in a foreign family. Children's letters from that time are full of bitterness. All the joys of my childhood have been replaced by torment and pain, writes one boy. Parents were guided by the principle, as long as your son is with you, he will learn nothing. It is curious that Florentine merchants deliberately sent their disobedient sons to distant countries, believing that only hardship and difficulties could make them real men. It would seem that all this testifies to a complete lack of parental love. However, historical documents have preserved other evidence. The archives contain touching letters from mothers worried about their children's health and fathers concerned about the fate of their sons at war. It's just that in that era, love was expressed differently, through preparation for a cruel world and teaching survival at any cost. Medieval childhood is a story not only of horror, but also of remarkable resilience. Children of that era grew up before their time, took on adult responsibilities, and faced realities that are difficult for modern children to even imagine. And many of them not only survived, but also became strong personalities, perhaps thanks to, rather than in spite of, such a harsh school of life. Today, these methods of upbringing seem barbaric to us, but it is worth considering. What will people say about our pedagogy in 500 years? History likes to pose such uncomfortable questions, forcing us to think about the relativity of the concepts of proper upbringing. One thing is certain. Children in the Middle Ages had a hard time, but they became the ancestors of modern Europe, proving that human nature is capable of withstanding the harshest trials. What do you think about this? Write your opinion in the comments.